A lot of us get nervous when we are drawing with alcohol markers. Maybe we're scared we will pick the wrong color, or the shade ends up way too dark, and suddenly it feels impossible to fix. In today's video, I'm going to show you 3 easy tips for using Ohuhu acrylic markers to cover mistakes and clean up your alcohol marker drawings. I have a couple of tree drawings here as examples. The first one on the right didn't turn out the way I wanted, and I made a bunch of mistakes. So I drew a second one, the one on the left. That one came out really nice, but it still has a few small errors. Mistakes happen all the time, even in drawings we are happy with. These 2 pieces are perfect examples for showing you how to fix alcohol marker mistakes quickly and easily. If you want to see the full process of how I drew this tree, consider joining my Patreon. You will find the real-time video there, along with a downloadable worksheet that includes a step-by-step guide and a clean outline you can trace for practice. In today's video, I'll be focusing only on how to use acrylic markers to fix mistakes. Before we get started, I want to quickly show you the acrylic markers I'm using today. Thank you to Ohuhu for sponsoring this video. The acrylic markers I'll be using are Ohuhu's new cotton core acrylic markers. They come with either a brush tip or a bullet tip. These are direct ink markers, so there's no need to press, shake, or prime them. Just pop the cap off and start drawing. The marker nib is soft and smooth. The ink flows really consistently. These markers come in a pull tab case, which I actually prefer over the canvas bag because it saves desk space and lets you see all the markers at a glance. One of the standout features of these markers is their high ink capacity. According to Ohuhu, each pen has enough ink to cover the equivalent of 15 full A4 sheets, so this should last you a long time. Here is a color chart I made. Feel free to pause the video and take a closer look to see if you like those colors. Now let's dive into how you can use acrylic markers to fix mistakes in your alcohol mark drawings. The first example is using acrylic markers to cover alcohol ink that has gone outside of your outline. Many of you probably already know that when the ink bleeds past the outline, you can use a no-color blender to push the color back in, and it also pushes the ink onto the paper underneath. So make sure you place a piece of paper below your artwork. This method works well, but it takes a little bit more time to wait for it to dry. A quicker option is to use a white acrylic marker to paint over the unwanted area. This method is fast and very useful for cleaning up small mistakes. However, when we are dealing with darker colors, using just a blender or just an acrylic marker might not give us the best results. As you can see here, even after the paper dries, the area where we use a blender still shows a bit of color, and the spot I covered with a couple layers of white acrylic marker also shows a little color peeking through. We can keep adding more layers of acrylic markers, but the downside is that the area can become noticeably thicker and end up looking brighter than the paper around it. So the best method, in my opinion, is to use a blender first to lighten and dilute the color, and then add the white acrylic marker on top. Just like this, now the color is barely visible, and the area blends in naturally without standing out. In a loose style drawing, it's usually not a big deal if the ink goes slightly outside of the outline. But sometimes when too much ink bleeds out, it can mess up the shape and the clarity of your drawing. In those cases, using an acrylic marker to clean up the edges is a quick and easy fix. So we don't have to worry too much if the ink slips outside of the lines while you're drawing. A blender can push and lighten alcohol ink, but it can fix mistakes in your line work. In that situation, acrylic markers are your best friend. For the second example, I made a mistake by drawing repetitive shapes. You can see 3 round clusters lined up in a row here. They look too similar and too repetitive. which makes them feel unnatural. One tip I want to mention is that I only use acrylic markers to fix mistakes during the later stages of my drawing. Once we apply acrylic paint, it becomes harder for alcohol markers to blend on top of it. So if I make a mistake early on, I either try the blender first, or most of the time simply keep drawing and leave the correction for later. I save acrylic markers for the final cleanup. When I first noticed this line work mistake, I decided to keep going and finish the piece. It is important to allow yourself to make mistakes. Once I added the alcohol marker coloring and looked at the drawing as a whole, I can see more clearly what needed to be fixed. For this particular mistake, I decided to cover both the line work and the darker colors with acrylic markers to break up the pattern and make it look more natural. So what I'm going to do here is use a few acrylic markers and blend them together on a smooth surface to match the alcohol marker color I have on the tree. I'm using a ceramic tile that I normally use for watercolor, but you can use glass, plastic, or just a piece of paper. A smooth surface just makes it easier to pick up the paint. Now we can just paint this area to cover the mistake. We can use our finger to smudge or dab the acrylic paint so it blends better on the paper. Sometimes you will need more than one layer, and that's totally normal. With this method, I'm able to cover both the line work and the darker color underneath. And it blends in very well. It looks very nice. The third example to use acrylic markers to fix alcohol marker mistakes is by using them to tone down areas that turns out too dark. Sometimes when you don't have many shades of alcohol markers, you might end up using too much of the darker color, or the transitions between light and dark isn't smooth because you don't have the right medium shades. In this case, we can put a layer of acrylic marker on top and use your finger to gently smudge it. This does not completely cover the alcohol marker layer, just slightly softens it. This helps tone down the darker areas and makes it look lighter. In the past, I used a white acrylic marker for this. It does lighten the area, but it also reduces the vibrancy of the color and can make it look washed out. So I try not to use white for this method unless the color is too vibrant and I actually want to tone down the saturation. For all the methods I mentioned earlier, I recommend using them towards the end of your drawing, when everything is mostly finished and you are just doing small touch-ups, because alcohol marker doesn't stick very well on top of the acrylic paint. However, if you put down acrylic paint and then decide you don't like it, you can use an alcohol marker on top to remove some of the acrylic paint. I hope these tips helps you feel more relaxed when you make mistakes in your drawing. When I drew the first tree, I thought the line work looked great and was really excited to finish it. But after adding the color, I didn't like how it turned out. It didn't look the way I wanted. Even so, I stuck with it and finished the piece. That allowed me to step back and really see what mistakes I had made and how I could improve my next drawing. After that, I started the second tree. Early on, I made a mistake by drawing a repetitive pattern, but I kept going and completed the piece. I also changed the color theme and tried some different techniques. The mistakes in the later stage become much less noticeable. For the final result, it turned out even better than I expected. Most of my work is trial and error. I hope sharing this experience can give you some inspiration and help you reduce your fear of making mistakes. I would love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment below. You can tell me if you have tried any of these methods before, share your experience, or just say hi. I always love seeing your messages, and it's always inspiring to hear from you. If you want to see the full tree drawing process, consider joining my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.